Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to cold Ottawa. And I welcome the witnesses we have here today. As you know, the reason we're here is our committee is doing a study on priorities if Canadian stakeholders have interest in bilateral and trilateral trade with North America. Of course, we're talking about our two trading partners, two present trading partners in NAFTA, United States and Mexico. Our committee started this study a few weeks ago, I guess a couple months ago now, and we've already visited the western United States. We were in the state of Washington, California, and Colorado. A couple weeks' time, we're going to be traveling through Midwest and down, finishing up in Washington. As many of you know here, it's a big trading bloc we have with our North American counterparts, and we want to see it continue to grow and expand, because it's good for jobs not only in Canada but United States and Mexico. So we have with us today, I think we have 2, 4, 5 witnesses here on deck. I think we're waiting for somebody from General Motors. Oh no, they're here. Thank you. And we have on by video conference, we have Canadian Sugar Institute. So welcome. So you know the routine, I guess. If this is your first time as a witness to a committee, we'd like for you to do your submissions within 5 minutes. Just keep in mind, don't go too fast because the translators have to translate it, and then we'll open it up to dialogue with members of Parliament. So again, thank you for coming, and I think we'll start off right away by via video conference. We have Sandra Marsden, President of the Canadian Sugar Institute. Go ahead, Sandra, you got the floor. You hear us all right?
I do, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I appreciate the opportunity to appear before the committee today as you consider priorities for the North American trading relationship. I'd like to speak to the critical importance of NAFTA to maintain and grow export opportunities, supporting the growth in Canadian investment and jobs in the sugar and further processing food sectors. The Institute represents Canadian refined sugar producers on nutrition and international trade affairs. We have 3 cane sugar refineries in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal, and a sugar beet processing plant in Taber, Alberta. Also, there are 2 further processing facilities in Ontario that produce products such as iced tea mixes, and sweetened cocoa mixes, and so on. The Canadian sugar industry is an integral part of Canada's food processing value chain. Our industry depends on food processors for 80% of sugar sales, and food processors in turn depend on Canada's local supply of high-quality, competitively priced refined sugar. Canada's sugar is an input to about 30% of food processing. This includes a wide range of products such as confectionery, mixes and doughs, cereals, baked goods, jams, and so on. In fact, major sugar-using processors account for approximately $18 billion in revenues, $6 billion in exports, and 62,000 Canadian jobs. The reason that access to Canadian sugar supports food processing in Canada is because the economics of our industry are driven by world market forces. Unlike the United States, Canada's sugar market does not benefit from price supports and high tariffs and quota restrictions. Canada's operations are globally efficient and competitive, but are underutilized given the U.S. and globally restrictive trade policies. Canadian sugar and processed foods depend on export markets. The U.S. is by far the most important market, representing 93% of sugar-containing food product exports. About 40% of Canada's refined sugar is exported in food products to the United States. Any disruption to this trade and the supply chain makes our industry and our food processing customers vulnerable. In fact, we know this because we've suffered from a long history of U.S. trade actions that have narrowed our trade opportunities. The combined impact of U.S. actions starting in 1994 have resulted in a loss of about 165,000 tons sugar production, representing about 13% of our production. For the past 20 years, Canada's refined sugar access to the United States has been limited to a small 10,300 ton quota for beet sugar, representing less than 0.1% of the U.S. 11 million ton market. The only opportunity to increase those exports is under emergency shortages. Sugar-containing products having more than 10% sugar are also restricted by fixed and inflexible quotas. Key restrictions include zero volume or small volume quotas, reclassification of freely traded products into quotas, restrictive rules of origin, as well as end-use restrictions that do not allow any further processing in the United States. While Canada continues to face these quota restrictions, Mexico's access to the United States was liberalized under the NAFTA. As a result, quota limitations are having a more significant impact on our negative impact on Canada than in the past, given Mexico's duty-free access for these products to the United States. For example, one impact of this trade imbalance has been the shift of some Canadian confectionery production out of Canada and the sourcing of intermediate inputs from Mexico. These developments have had a significant negative impact on Canada's overall net trade in processed foods. Two-way trade in sugar-containing food products with the United States amounted to $10.5 billion in 2016. While Canada maintained a trade surplus of $950 million, this is well below the peak of $1.2 billion over a decade ago. Canada has a trade deficit with Mexico in these products, which worsened to $155 million in 2016. This is extremely important to our industry because this trade loss has resulted in a decline in capacity utilization, which creates higher input costs for our food processing customers. We see the renegotiation, or the likely renegotiation of the NAFTA, as a critical opportunity to modernize trade in sugar and sugar-containing products, to improve capacity utilization and efficiencies in Canada's sugar sector, and as a critical factor supporting the future of food processing in Canada. Canada is the logical supplier of high-quality sugar and sugar-containing products along the Canada-U.S. border and has an established track record of exporting in a commercially meaningful and responsible, fairly traded manner. An improved trade balance within the NAFTA will help restore value chains where Canadian sugar provides a competitive advantage for the production of intermediate and finished food products. Ultimately, this will help improve the decline in Canada's net trade in processed foods and enhance investment and jobs in this important manufacturing sector. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And we're going to move over to the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, and we have Mr. Sinclair. Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of your study on North American trade relations. The Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives is an independent, nonpartisan research institute with over 3 decades of experience analyzing Canadian trade and investment treaties. The Trump administration is demanding a new framework for North American trade. Despite an imminent NAFTA renegotiation, the specific goals the U.S. will pursue are still unclear. One belief that seems to unite the nationalist and globalist factions in the new administration is that by throwing its weight around, the U.S. can force big concessions from Canada and Mexico. While this is a difficult situation, Canada is not defenseless. The Canada-U.S. trading relationship is balanced and mutually beneficial, which many Americans recognize, and it is helpful to reinforce that message, as our governments have been doing. Yet the anxiety about trade and globalization that Donald Trump exploited to win the White House runs deep and goes beyond his core supporters. Canada's negotiating positions need to reflect that reality. When President Trump talks about favoring trade deals that support American workers, he provides such an opening. There are many ways to provide a better deal for workers in all 3 countries. Canada could call President Trump's bluff by championing a fairer distribution of the benefits of trade. An obvious first step is to include strong, fully enforceable labor standards in any deal. Mexican workers whose real wages have languished under NAFTA and are rarely free to join independent unions would be the primary beneficiaries. But rising wages and improved working conditions in Mexico and many southern U.S. states would also benefit workers in the rest of North America. The Trump administration also wants to strengthen NAFTA's rules of origin. Although there is plenty of scope for abuse, higher North American content rules could benefit North American manufacturing workers by discouraging the use of high levels of offshore content. Canada has had a negative experience under NAFTA's investor-state dispute settlement system and should not hesitate to push to eliminate it. We are the most sued party, and this trend is getting worse. Bad rulings, such as in the recent Bilcon case, have a chilling effect on legitimate public policy, such as rigorous environmental assessments. Meanwhile, the U.S. has never lost a case. The Trump administration intends to bolster Buy American purchasing policies, which could sideswipe Canadian suppliers. Canada's standard response, to seek an exemption or waiver, has fallen short before and will likely fare worse today. It's time to consider a new approach. Canada could instead offer reciprocal Buy North American policies for new public infrastructure spending. If this is rebuffed, Canada should maximize national economic spin-offs on its own planned public investments through Buy Canadian policies. But there are lines that Canada should not cross. With U.S. industries teeing up a long list of trade remedy challenges against Canadian products, Canada can hardly give in to U.S. demands to eliminate or weaken NAFTA's Chapter 19 binational review process. If anything, from a Canadian perspective, it needs to be strengthened. Nor can Canada afford to give in to President Trump's scapegoating of Canadian dairy farmers. Without supply management, our dairy farmers would be put in the same predicament as their U.S. counterparts, who suffer from the effects of overproduction and farm gate prices that fall below production costs. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross recently said that Canada has adopted an anti-patent position, particularly in pharmaceuticals. This is both false and worrisome. Fully aligning our system of patent protection for medicines with the U.S. model would be very expensive for Canadian consumers and harmful to our healthcare system. Just to close, in general, Canada's immediate priority should be maintaining its tariff-free access to the U.S. market. But it is not too early to be thinking about the end game and potential exit strategies. Reverting to WTO-bound tariff rates would be disruptive but not catastrophic. If the Trump administration were to make good on its threat to terminate NAFTA, Canadian exporters could face an additional US $3.5 to $5 billion in duties. If an America First NAFTA is worse than the multilateral alternative, Canada should naturally choose the latter. NAFTA renegotiation will be difficult and unpredictable. Canada needs to be prepared to stand up to any bullying and to consider its options if U.S. negotiating demands become too unreasonable, costly, or harmful to Canadian interests. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Sinclair. And we're going to go over to the Canadian manufacturers and exporters, and we have Mr. Wilson. Go ahead, sir. You got the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for inviting CME here to speak on behalf of Canada's 90,000 manufacturers and exporters and our association's 2,500 direct members to discuss Canada's trade with our NAFTA partners. NAFTA is the most critical trade relationship that exists for Canadian industry, and we're here today to show our support for the government's efforts to maintain that relationship and to find ways to modernize and strengthen it where possible. Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters is Canada's largest industry and trade association, with offices across the country, is the chair of the Canadian Manufacturing Coalition, which represents 55 sectoral manufacturing associations. More than 85% of our members are small and medium-sized enterprises, representing every industrial sector, every export sector, and all regions of the country. Manufacturing is the single largest business sector in Canada and across the NAFTA region. In Canada, manufacturing sales surpassed $600 billion in 2016 for the third consecutive year, directly accounting for 11% of Canadians' total economic output, while employing over 1.7 million Canadians directly in highly productive, value-added, high-paying jobs. With the base in the NAFTA region, manufacturers are also directly responsible for the majority of Canada's exports. In 2015 and 16, manufactured goods exports reached nearly $350 billion each year, an all-time record high, and accounted for almost 70% of total Canadian exports, with nearly 80% of those exports going to our NAFTA partners. Much of this trade is due to the deep integration of manufacturing operations across the NAFTA region, and in particular between Canada and the U.S. This integration has created a unique relationship for our countries globally. We do not simply trade goods with each other, we build things together, we innovate together, and we compete with the world together. Canada, or NAFTA in most ways, is a model for which all trade agreements should be judged. It has helped increase the standard of living of all participants. It has strengthened industry by combining the talents and expertise of each market, creating bigger markets at home, and strengthening our combined competitiveness globally. No other trade agreement Canada has can compare to the historical, current, or future importance for our economy and our citizens. At the same time, it does not mean that the agreement should not or could not be improved. Over the nearly 25 years since it was negotiated and came into force, the world around us has changed remarkably. Things that we take for granted today were barely even on our collective radars at the time. The internet and e-commerce, smartphones and connected devices are just a few of the technologies that has changed the way we live and work. The world around us and our global competitors have also changed. China, for example, had a GDP of only about 440 million in 1993. Today is a $12 trillion economy. And the world of manufacturing has also changed. No longer is it simply about taking raw materials and turning it into a consumer product. Today, the lines between manufacturing, technology, and services have blurred, and companies are focused on creating solutions for the lowest cost with the greatest customer value. CME has worked constructively with the federal government for years on avenues to improve and strengthen the existing NAFTA framework to reflect these changing realities. Efforts like the Border Action Plans of the 2000s, the Regulatory Cooperation Council, and Beyond the Border Agreements of the 2010s were aimed directly at improving the NAFTA manufacturing platform without opening up the agreement because that was seen as politically impossible. Now, opening the agreement is a political reality, and we should look for ways to cement improvements that support the economic base of NAFTA. To help prioritize, CME is surveying our members to identify priorities for NAFTA modernization and improvement. While our survey is still ongoing, I can give you an overview of the responses as they currently stand. As a starting point, and most primarily, the overwhelming priority is for Canada to maintain market access across the NAFTA region. While companies want improvement, they are also very concerned about renegotiation that leads to worse economic outcomes through more restrictions, barriers, protectionism on imports and exports of people, goods, or services. On specific measures for improvement, the priorities mainly stem from the deep level of integration in the volume and value of the trade. Improve customs processes to speed border transactions and eliminating uncertainty through reduced red tape for both people and goods ranks as a top priority. Following that, companies are looking for maintaining effective dispute resolution, settlement processes, improved regulatory cooperation and alignment, and coordination on action on dumping and trade policy more generally with other markets. Many of these priorities have already been included in the existing Canada-Europe Comprehensive Free Trade Agreement, as well as were being negotiated in the TPP, and we believe could create a framework for a modernized NAFTA. At the same time, the relationship between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico is fundamentally different than those representing those other trade agreements. We believe that if Canada can come to agreement on those priority areas with other largely new trading partners, we should be looking to go beyond these commitments with our NAFTA partners. As mentioned earlier, we don't simply trade goods with them, but rather we build goods together by leveraging the 25-year-old NAFTA platform. This negotiation should be the time to create a new phase of NAFTA and cement in place and go beyond where possible the direction started under the recent RCC and Beyond the Border Agreements, where Canada, the U.S., and where possibly Mexico are regulating and security on the perimeter together and restrictions on the internal economy are eliminated as much as possible. Thank you again for inviting us to participate in your study. I look forward to the questions and the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. And we're going to go over to Ford Motor Company of Canada, and we got Ms. Hughes. Go ahead, you got the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to provide Ford of Canada's views on the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Ford Motor Company is a global automotive and mobility company with about 202,000 employees and 62 plants worldwide. As Canada's longest established automaker, Ford has employed thousands of Canadians since 1904 in high-quality advanced manufacturing jobs that have helped to build and sustain Canada's middle class. Today in Canada, Ford employs over 8,300 men and women in 3 vehicle assembly and engine manufacturing plants, 3 R&D centers, and 2 parts and distribution centers. Ford's network of 428 dealers supports more than 19,000 employees in communities across Canada. In addition, Ford purchases over $5 billion annually from Canadian parts suppliers to support both our Canadian and global footprint. Since 2000, Ford has invested over $12 billion in our Canadian operations, including $700 million in Oakville, to produce vehicles in Canada for global markets like China, South America, and now Europe. Last year, in 2016, Ford exported over 18,000 Oakville-built Edges to Europe, including right-hand drive and diesel versions. Earlier this year, we were proud to announce an additional investment of $1.2 billion to secure a new engine program for our Windsor operations and to create Ford's first ever Canadian Product Development Center, the Connectivity and Innovation Center here in Ottawa, in fact, with 300 software and hardware engineers pursuing R&D and connected vehicle technologies. Needless to say, Canada is a very important market for Ford, and we are proud that Ford has been the #1 brand in Canada for 8 years. Trade is fundamental to our business. Each year, on a global basis, Ford exports over 40% of the vehicles that we build worldwide. In Canada, trade policy is even more fundamental to the success of our operations, since 100% of the engines and 90% of the vehicles that Ford builds in Canada are exported. In the last decade, Ford has increasingly diversified our exports from Canada to countries outside of North America. Last year, in fact,
Excuse me. Just, if I can remind, just slow down a bit.
Okay.
We have a little problem catching up. I don't mind if your witnesses go over half a minute or so. It's better to slow down and we get the translation.
Okay.
So go ahead, Ms.
Okay,
Hughes.
thanks. I thought I was talking slower. Okay. Last year, 16% of Ford's Canadian vehicle production was exported outside of NAFTA. That said, the U.S. market and NAFTA remain the single biggest and most important market for Canadian-produced vehicles and engines. All of Ford's Canadian engine production and 74% of Ford's Canadian vehicle production is exported to the U.S. and Mexico. Ford has been and continues to be a very strong supporter of the North American Free Trade Agreement. In fact, it was the auto sector and the 1965 U.S.-Canada Auto Pact that became the basis for the U.S.-Canada Free Trade Agreement and then for the North American Free Trade Agreement. NAFTA has created one of the most highly integrated and competitive automotive sectors in the world, including one of the most competitive and efficient global supply chains. Canada is a small vehicle market by global standards, and Canada's integration into the larger NAFTA region has created economies of scale that have allowed Canada and the NAFTA region to competitively produce vehicles for export to other regions around the world. And while Ford continues to support NAFTA, we recognize that as a 25-year-old agreement, there are opportunities to modernize the agreement. That is why Ford is working with all 3 NAFTA governments to ensure the modernization of NAFTA preserves and enhances the globally competitive integration of the North American auto industry, while also incorporating important advances to create a modern 21st century agreement that sets the standard that all future trade agreements should be measured by. Specifically, Ford recommends modernizing NAFTA by adding strong and enforceable currency manipulation disciplines and by achieving acceptance of U.S. automotive safety standards across the region. In addition, Ford also supports modernizing NAFTA by streamlining customs procedures to make business more efficient and by adopting high standard labor and environmental provisions and improving border infrastructure. While continuing to support trade within the region, the modernization of NAFTA should also encourage trade diversification outside of the region by ensuring that North American vehicles can compete in global markets around the world. This is why it is critically important to ensure that both currency manipulation and an acceptance of U.S. vehicle standards are included in the modernization. These 2 issues are the most significant non-tariff barriers that vehicles produced in Canada or in North America face in global markets. To date, Canada's auto sector and Canadians have benefited from Canada's unfettered access to the U.S. auto market as a result of NAFTA. When Canada concludes CITA, Canada's auto sector will be positioned with duty-free access to North America and to the EU as well, 2 of the largest and most important vehicle markets in the world. Looking forward, Ford will continue to support Canada's efforts to establish new free trade agreements with countries like India and Brazil. These markets offer additional opportunities to increase Canadian vehicle exports. Ford will also continue to speak out against markets that remain closed to Canadian vehicle exports, markets like South Korea and Japan. Closed markets can only be opened by achieving the right terms in trade agreements that eliminate all barriers, including currency manipulation. Throughout our history, Ford of Canada has played an active and constructive role in articulating the trade policy issues that we need to be addressed in trade agreements in order to support Canada's auto sector. We look forward to continuing to play this role as we talk about modernizing NAFTA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. And we're going to move over to General Motors of Canada, and we got Mr. Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to the members of the committee for this chance to add a few words to my friend Carolyn, Matthew, and my colleagues, as well on behalf of General Motors Canada. And as a quick reminder, GM Canada has world-class assembly plants in St. Catharines, Ingersoll, and in Oshawa, Ontario, where we make engines, transmissions, cars, crossovers, and soon trucks. Our business directly employs about 10,000 people in Canada, and we generate many thousands of related jobs in our supply chain, in customer care, and in dealerships coast to coast. And most recently, we're increasing our R&D and our engineering work in Canada for key future automotive technologies to a total of about 1,000 engineering positions that are working in areas like active safety, autonomous vehicle development, software, and we're doing that in Oshawa, Markham, Kitchener, Waterloo, Toronto, and Kapuskasing. NAFTA, of course, is the framework that enables GM and the broader North American automotive industry to be the manufacturing engine of our economy. NAFTA's automotive chapter sets out the trade rules for the deeply integrated and highly efficient auto supply chain between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And that's a unique aspect of our industry that really must be understood and protected in these negotiations. So my advice to the committee, put simply, is that we can and should modernize NAFTA in a way that strengthens our competitiveness as a global trading bloc. And at the same time, we must take extreme care to do no harm to the integrated NAFTA auto supply chain that is extraordinarily beneficial and important to Canada's economy. NAFTA enables automotive parts, materials, and finished vehicles to cross our borders duty-free and just in time for the benefit of our customers. And famously, auto parts and materials of our Tier 1 and Tier 2 customers may cross borders 6 or 7 times as they're built up into components ready for final assembly. At GM Canada, we export a little more than 90% of the vehicles that we make, primarily en route to dealers and customers all across the United States, which of course is a market 10 times the size of ours. At the same time, we import almost 90% of the vehicles that our dealers sell to Canadians. Our auto trade with the U.S. is balanced, it's duty-free, and it's very beneficial to our economy and for consumers. Now, while our vehicle trade is balanced, Canada imports significantly more auto parts and materials from the United States than we're able to source locally or elsewhere. This trade in auto parts benefits both Canada and the United States. It contributes to Canada's competitiveness while supporting U.S. manufacturing jobs, especially in the Great Lakes states. Canada is the #1 customer for the U.S., and much of that business is in auto parts. And so a good thing to remind our U.S. colleagues. Oshawa, for example, receives about 80 trucks a day that go across the border. And about 50% or more of our suppliers, our individual parts, come from the United States. So in this complex and mutually beneficial trading relationship, there are some things that we must take care to maintain and protect, and there are some things that we believe can be modernized and improved. Under the category of do no harm, we must set out to reduce, not add, red tape. A lot of bureaucracy is still required in tracing auto parts as they move across borders in NAFTA today. We would prefer to see tracing eliminated. NAFTA's rules of origin for qualified duty-free automotive trade within North America are already the highest of any U.S. agreement. These should not be increased if we are to maintain our global competitive stance. And we cannot just look inward in considering NAFTA. Canada, the U.S., and Mexico together are a competitive bloc in the global auto business. We must enhance, not compromise, that competitiveness. So under the category of modernization, GM Canada supports the recommendations recently put forward by the American Automotive Policy Council, and those include that we should build upon the progress made through the RCC and others to align our vehicle technical standards within NAFTA, while insisting that countries outside NAFTA recognize and accept our technical standards. North American product is globally competitive, but we must insist that others tear down their non-tariff barriers to our exports. If we want to continue enjoying the economic benefits of our North American auto sector, global auto trade cannot be a one-way street into our market. Modernizing also means continuing to improve our border infrastructure, as we are doing with the Gordie Howe Bridge in Windsor, and by continuing to streamline our customs procedures for goods and for people. The AAPC has also called for adding enforceable currency manipulation disciplines that Carolyn mentioned, so that countries outside of NAFTA do not take advantage of our market by artificially reducing their currencies. So to sum up, we build things together. In this deeply integrated North American auto sector, GM is at the forefront of Canadian jobs, exports, and innovation. There's a great deal at stake as we open NAFTA negotiations, and we should start by ensuring we do no harm to our integrated supply chain, and then we can modernize our auto trade in NAFTA by cutting red tape, aligning on standards, improving the movement of goods and people across borders, and by strengthening our global competitiveness as a global trading bloc. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Patterson. And as I alluded to, we are going to go to Detroit and Illinois and Michigan, and so we'll be seeing some of your counterparts down there. So that'll help keep the bond going. We're going to move over now to the Pacific Northwest Economic Region. And, sir, it's great to see you here. And we met with your group, I think, when we were in Seattle. And it was very informative, and we had a good reception. And it was an eye-opener for a lot of things that your group put forward to us. So welcome, and the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, members of the committee. It was great to see you in Seattle. And I guess, PENWR, as we call it, is a unique organization that's formed in statute by Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and then BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Northwest and Yukon territories. It's 28 years old, and we have 22 different working groups in all of the key industry sectors in the region. And as I like to say, our economic watersheds flow north and south out there. And we have focused on NAFTA and looked at the benefits of NAFTA for 20 years. This is a very interesting time. I have to, applaud you for a Team Canada approach. I think that's the right approach, having working on consistent messaging. In November, we set up a NAFTA modernization task force, and we've been working with the international trade offices of all the states and provinces, as well as private sector representatives, in looking at what could this well-developed region on the northern border in the U.S. say to both Ottawa and D.C. in terms of NAFTA. And in this process of meeting regularly since January, we've developed a pretty in-depth survey that we've sent out to 10,000 of our members, and are encouraging other organizations to use as well, to bring back some data, which, I also want to say that this is the first time in the U.S., and I'm an American, so we've used the TPA 2015 Act, which really states once this 90-day period begins, the Congress, the Speaker and the President of the Senate will select special congressional advisory committees in the Senate and the House. So we're focusing on who would we want on those congressional advisory committees, and they are formed out of the Ways and Means in the House and the Finance Committee in the Senate. So we're meeting with our congressional champions and letting them know that we are preparing data and analysis, and that we really want to have an opportunity to present that to these committees once they're formed. I think that it's very important for Canada to, you've been great at developing data on how foreign direct investment from Canada is impacting specific states, but we need to hone that down to specific congressional districts, because in our system, it's not like yours. We have a fiefdom of 535, kings out there, and it's all about their district. So, I'm very encouraged meeting with John Manley's group, the Business Council of Canada, because they're taking a specific targeted approach to 80 congressional districts and trying to really look at, okay, how many jobs in these districts are related to Canadian investment or partnerships. And what we have to do, we have to get Americans talking to their congressmen, not in Washington, D.C. It never works. You guys, you've been to Washington. It's you get 10 minutes with if you're lucky. So what we need is at the town hall meetings and at the, letters to the editor from simple people who say, hey, my job is really on the line here. Don't screw up. The relationship with Canada is really important. And the other thing I wanted to just keep, the Congressional Research Service is very well respected in Congress. So they just came out with their report on NAFTA. I sent it to your committee, but maybe not in time. But this is 6 weeks old. But in the report, just so you know, this goes to every congressman. And I was so dismayed. I'm a champion of. Anyway, it says, the overall net effect of NAFTA on the U.S. economy has been relatively small, primarily because total trade with both Mexico and Canada is equal to less than 5% of U.S. GDP. Okay, this is what stuff is going out there. We have to overcome with real people telling real stories about why this is important. Anyway, it's worth reviewing this report because they got a lot of credibility. I mean, it's not the full story. So I think the targeted data is really important. Skirmishes around the edges of NAFTA, the dairy, that's less than 0.5% of our trade. So I worry that this is a process that could take 24 to 36 months, depending on all this. These are not easy things. So I want to get the big picture out, why this is important to both countries and all three countries, and try not to get lost in the peripherals. We'll always have irritants, but we always work through them, and we have mechanisms to do that. I think we need to work on consistent messaging and really have people working together with strategic partnerships. And it's a great opportunity for us to engage our strategic partnerships across North America. I will say that that we need to emphasize our collaborative manufacturing platforms, as has been mentioned by all the folks here at the table. And we can and should modernize, but do no harm, and really get the message out from an American perspective. It's and I appreciate the committees. We don't know where the administration is going exactly. So anyway, from my organization, we're making a lot of inroads into the administration in every way we can think of to be a vehicle to really let them know how important this relationship is and not to screw it up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrison, and hopefully we can keep drawing from you. I mean, you're such an ally, and you're giving us such good information and also advice here. It's a big task we're undertaking, and especially your comments about getting right to the individuals who are being affected on both sides of the border are key for us. And so thank you again, and I hope we can keep relying on you to give us some advice. And we hope there's others in your position across the United States that have the same perspective and represent the same kind of groups, and that's who we're going to. And as soon as that committee is struck, we're going to, that committee that you're talking about in the United States, it'd be good for us to know who's on there, because maybe we can bump into them when we're in Washington and reflect the great trading relationship we have. So thank you very much, and thank you all the witnesses for your presentation. So we're going to open it up to dialogue with the MPs, and we have who? Mr. Hoback. So I'm first. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, I think, Chair, I just want to highlight there's a couple guests in the room here. We have Mike Cuff. He's actually a state legislator from Montana who's part of Panwar. And Larry Doak, he's a MLA from Saskatchewan. Mike is a good example with zebra mussels stopping the spread of zebra mussels west. working across the border to make sure that we don't see that infestation move into the western U.S. or western Canada. And there's an example of how we work together and how we get good results. So, Mike, thank you for that work on that. I know there's 2 surveys in the works. CME, Matt, you said you've got a survey, and or Matthew and Matt, you said you had a survey. Can we get you to table those surveys when they're completed? I think that would be helpful for this committee to look at for sure. I'm kind of curious what your members are going to be saying. It's been a crazy while since the inauguration. I think in the last 10 weeks I've been home 5 days because of this file. Been out talking to a lot of people across Canada and the U.S., and there's a lot of fear. And maybe I'll start with you, Matthew. What's happening in the investment side of the business community here in Canada, and even with your colleagues in the U.S.? What are they telling you as far as the fact that we don't know where things are sitting right now? What's that doing to projects? Are they on hold? Just maybe give us just a glimpse on what's happening there.
Sure. I think it'd be a fairly short answer. I think some companies, David and Caroline from Ford and General Motors just talked a little bit about specifically their companies that are making investment decisions. But I think on the small and mid-sized companies, though, there's just a lot of uncertainty right now. The companies I'm talking to, just huge uncertainty. It has nothing to do with anything this government's doing in Canada. It's just generally there's been economic uncertainty going around the world for quite some time now, and this just adds to it. And so if you look at kind of investment decisions that are going on in Canada and all across all business lines and especially in manufacturing, the investment isn't happening to the level we need for economic growth. And certainly we're hoping anyways to see that trend reverse. But yeah, these discussions on NAFTA, especially when so much of our exports, so much of our business is reliant on NAFTA region, it doesn't help that investment for sure.
I think there's NAFTA and then there's border adjustment tax. Both those come into play in that creating that environment. One of the concerns I have is we hear the talk about, what can one country get from another country? And it really concerns me because it's not the platform that you necessarily want to start an agreement on. It should be on what can we do as a bloc to move forward to be as competitive as possible as a bloc in selling our goods outside our bloc. What advice would you give us to get that conversation changed to that manner? And Matt Morrison, maybe I'll start with you there. What do we need to do? I know we've done lots of visits into Washington, D.C., but I think this committee is probably one of the first committees to actually go outside of Washington and talk to other folks. Is that the right angle, or is there any other advice you'd give to us on helping to change that channel to get it to be a discussion on what we need to do as a bloc?
That's a great point, Randy. And I think that, it's good to remember that the U.S. is not the enemy. We're your market. And within the U.S., this whole thing is really about China. So we can all get behind blaming China. And keeping in mind that this relationship is on firm footing. So we're going to have these skirmishes for the next 18 months. It's going to be, it's going to be tough. But we should remember that we have a foundation that's long and deep. And the people we're really talking to are our best friends and allies. And I think that having that as a basis is really important.
So you mentioned China and the focus on China. I've heard that also. Now, we're also talking about looking at a possibility of doing some sort of agreement with China. What would be the implications of trying to do that at the same time as NAFTA? And, what would be the results of that information? Is it well known down there that we're actually talking to China?
So I'm not sure how to answer that. It's something that you'd have to take into consideration, how that might play out. I mean, the uncertainty that we're facing is the difficulty. We hopefully will get this thing wrapped up and, as soon as we can. But on the other hand, you got to do what you got to do. So
yeah, okay, David.
I got 10 seconds, so
I guess I'm done.
I don't want to throw a question in there and have to cut off the witness. So we're going to move over to the Liberals now, and Ms. Ludwig, you got the floor. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for your presentations. I'm going to just take a launch off of Mr. Hoback's questions as well, in terms of not talking about countries in division, but countries in partnership. We know that certainly we have similarities with the United States in particular, but we also have differences. And I think that's also part of we need to also be cognizant of that. The last day and a half, I've been attending the Can-Am Trade Border Alliance Conference, and it's a great testament to all the work that's been done, particularly between Canada and the U.S. on forging greater alliances, deepening the integration chain between our two countries, and they too are 25 years old, just like NAFTA. So my first question is actually to Mr. Wilson. With NAFTA being 25 years old, we have a North American integrated supply chain. Where are the opportunities for greater integration? So not isolation policies, but greater integration in terms of the North American supply chain that we have done so well on for the last number of years.
Sure. Well, I think generally speaking, pretty much in every sector, we heard from the auto folks here, there's still growth opportunities there. And when we survey our members actually generally about where the growth opportunities are for them, they always look at the U.S. as the primary market. Most Canadian companies still don't export. And in fact, the vast majority, 97%, don't export out of Canada. So it's huge opportunity still for especially small and mid-sized companies to export and grow those areas. Specific sectors, automotive is the biggest integrated platform. There's always going to be new opportunities as that continues, as long as it maintains the footprint, and especially if we can do the things that David and Caroline are talking about here in terms of growing North America as a global platform instead of looking at us just as a regional block to trade amongst ourselves, but really leveraging it for global platforms. Huge opportunity for global growth for Canadian companies. Other sectors, and primarily the one I would look at would be agri-food. We export almost no food out of Canada. Still, whether it's for manufacturing or whether it's for whether it's finished goods, we still export very little of what's actually produced here. And that, to me, and CME generally, when we're looking at new market opportunities, agri-food is the one sector that we perform very poorly on internationally and really see a real opportunity in the U.S. and beyond.
Okay, thank you. My next question is regarding technology. So the Canada Border Services and the CBP in the U.S. are certainly working towards greater integration in terms of our customs. Over the last while, I represent a riding with 5 border crossings to the United States. One of the things that we often found over the years was the bottleneck, the border wait times, and looking at the opportunities. I would like to hear from you as panelists in terms of the opportunities for an e-manifest, so that the pre-clearance is actually done on this side, and what that might mean to border wait times and the transparency and where you feel that in terms of the direction of technology and how we can certainly improve our supply chain.
I'm happy to start, and if you want to, then you can. So this has been going on for years, decades, in fact, and is long overdue. And in fact, Canada's lack of investment in its own technology and the government is part of the reason why it's taken so long. Certainly, the industry sector as a whole, the people doing the trading have long supported this. Companies like GM and Ford have long ago eliminated their own, paper-based processes and are using almost all electronic tracking. They're also on a system called Custom Self-Assessment, which eliminates pretty much all border reporting, which is a fantastic program. But I guess the question I have, and this goes back to, certainly Matt would know about this, in going back to the border accords of the 2000s and beyond the border and things like that. The idea of those were to eliminate border processing, not just make them electronic. What's the point in tracking this stuff? We're not shipping stuff between unknown entities. We're shipping stuff between Ford in Ontario and Ford in Michigan, or GM here and GM in Mexico. We know who they're coming from and who they're going to. What's the value of it? What's at all? And we get security and everything else and the need to do that stuff. But that to me is what it always comes back to. If we do a proper job on the perimeter and we're securing the perimeter the way we're supposed to, report everything after the fact. The border, frankly, is just a nuisance for most people and companies. So I guess that's what we're hoping for is through this NAFTA renegotiation is we go further than we have in the past. We get the opportunity to cement in place some of the things that have occurred, but just saying, well, let's make it electronic doesn't eliminate the burden, and we need to start eliminating burdens, not just make them electronic.
Other panelists as well.
Doesn't have to be a very short comment.
Okay, I just want to endorse what Matthew said. The borders are critically important, not just the streamlined procedures, but also the infrastructure. So, as an example, last Thursday night, May 4th, I traveled from Windsor to Sarnia. The quickest way is through the United States, and the Blue Water Bridge was lined up with trucks at 12 midnight right over the bridge. And it wasn't, there was no other traffic on the bridge, but you need the resources at the bridge as well. And we need to keep in mind that a vehicle built in North America can cross the border 7 times. Every single time it goes through that border, it's hitting those traffic jams, and it's requiring those manifests. And it puts us at a competitive disadvantage to vehicles that are built outside of the region and shipped in, which only cross a border once. So we're facing 7 times that inefficiency.
Thank you, and we're going to move over to an MP who knows all about making vehicles, the NDP. Ms. Ramsey, you got the floor.
I don't know where to start. As an auto worker, a former Ford employee, someone who lives on a border riding, someone who comes from labor, excuse me, I could ask you questions all day, so let's get to it. So the first question I really want to talk to Mr. Sinclair, because you touched on something I think that is incredibly important. And we've heard a lot of, this do no harm, the thought that we don't want to do any harm. We understand the importance of these integrated chains, the reality of how many jobs depend on trade with the U.S. in North America. I think that's well understood. But what's not understood is how having the environmental and labor chapters sitting outside of the agreement has weakened the agreement. And so you spoke a little bit about that, and I believe that we have to leverage our strengths, and we have to actually look for better, look for improvements. And that's across the board. People want improvements and modernization. So I wonder if you can speak to the ways that you think the labor and environmental chapters, or the side letters rather, could be brought into the agreement and what that strength would achieve.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, I think in a 21st century agreement, it's absolutely crucial that a trade agreement, that those matters be in the main text of the agreement, and that they be fully enforceable. And I think it's crucial, as everyone on this panel has so far, to emphasize the commonalities and the cooperative spirit and the importance of integrated supply chains and so on and so forth. But I also think that parliamentarians have to give at least some thought to what underlies the Trump phenomenon.
It's something we heard when we traveled in the U.S. actually to the states that we went to, that there are a lot of working people clearly that feel left out in NAFTA. In GM in Windsor, we certainly have lost that facility, and to drive by there is heartbreaking to see that razed to the ground. At the same time, we see the strength of labor and your companies coming together to bring new work, to bring jobs to Canada. So I think that there is this underlying current of people who've felt left out because they've lost jobs to Mexico, because things have happened, and we hear that in the U.S. and we hear that here. But I want to talk about our auto sector. And obviously, auto is incredibly important to Windsor-Essex. And it's important that we protect our domestic manufacturing sectors, including sugar. And I'm sorry to leave you out of the conversation, but it is important as well. So I want to talk about the regional value contents and the rules of origin requirements. And I wonder if you can tell us how this will impact on your operations here in Canada.
Yeah, get that up. Well, as I indicated in ours, currently under NAFTA, the required regional rule of origin is actually the highest of any agreement that the United States has signed. So it's already at a very high regional requirement. And our position would be we would not want to add additional red tape and requirements at a national level or the like. We'd like to continue to build on the effectiveness of NAFTA in that. And to the points you raised about investment, I think it's important that we keep in mind that NAFTA is the framework under which we trade. And what I do every day is get up and fight for investment to come here in Canada. And we do that together with Unifor. We do that together with our municipalities, and we do it with the people around the table. If I look back over the last 10 years, I'd say that Canada has done more to help us to build an investment base here by aligning our standards with the United States and by improving our border crossings than I could have imagined 10 years ago. I look in the last short period of time and I see some advancement in terms of the Auto Innovation Fund that was long needed and made a huge difference. These are all things that are really important for us to continue to win investments. But that's what we do every single day. One of the things I mentioned is that we actually purchase more parts from the United States than in Canada. We would prefer to buy our parts in Canada. Why? Because we have to buy American parts with these little Canadian dollars. And so it's much more expensive. It's a concern to us that we've seen a lot of the parts business actually moving south, and that's been a concern. But a flip side in this discussion, it's good to remind our colleagues in the United States that every time that we make a purchase of those U.S. parts, a job is involved in that as well. And there's many, many American jobs that are related to this trade relationship in producing vehicles on both sides of the border. So it's in our mutual interest for us to build upon this. Can we improve upon it? Absolutely. Should we look at labor and environmental agreements within the agreement? Absolutely.
Thank you, and time is well over, but good questions, and we're going to move over to Mr. Fonseca. You got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the manufacturers and the associations that support the manufacturers, and that for all the jobs that you've created, for the risks that you've taken. I feel that it has been a partnership. Not only in terms of business, but also with government. We were there with the bailout when you needed us, and investment, the investment, and then we came out more fruitful on the other side. So that has been very important, and Canadians have seen that and have understood the partnership and the friendship that we have, just in terms of people to people, how we have families, tourism, etc. But the public opinion polls have looked at sentiment between how Canadians perceive or see the United States, and they are at their lowest levels, and these have been tracked since 1982. Today, they are at their lowest levels that we're seeing. And I think it's partly because of all the negativity and everything that we're hearing around trade and isolationism, et cetera, and then looking to open back up. We've just signed and passed through Parliament what we feel is the most progressive trade agreement in Canada's history, and that is CIIT. So what we've done with the European Union. I don't know how immersed you are in that agreement, but as we look to this tweaking or modernization or whatever with NAFTA, from CIIT, have you seen aspects of CIIT that you would like to see in any kind of changes to NAFTA? And I'll open that up to maybe Mr. St. Clair, if thanks, please.
Well, I think there are aspects of CITA that will be very difficult to get into NAFTA. I mean, I've been at the committee before talking about CITA's investment court system. That was put on the table in TTIP and was rejected by the United States for a number of different reasons. I think there's an opportunity to take a much more assertive position around investment. I mean, around investor-state dispute settlement. There are many, even in the Republican base, that are quite critical of it, the sovereigntist wing. I think there's an opportunity to curtail it substantially, if not to propose removing it. I also think, for the record, that Canada needs some strong asks in this negotiation. It can't all be sitting back and trying to defend the status quo. So I think taking a strong position on investor-state dispute settlement makes sense. We were not meant to be the target of that, but we've turned out to be.
Okay, I'd just like to add, from Ford's perspective, CITA is an incredibly important deal. We have been very supportive of that deal. We specifically made our, it helped us make the business case for Oakville to put the global platform there, knowing that we could export up to 40,000 units to the European Union. As I mentioned, in 2016, we're already, in our first year, we exported just under 20,000 units, and we're growing that substantially. So CITA is incredibly important. Contrasting CITA to NAFTA, though, I just want to point out that the rule of origin in NAFTA is higher. At 62.5%. As my colleague Dave pointed out, it's one of the highest in the world. So NAFTA has a more robust rule of origin, but we also have to be careful because there will probably be some suggestion that we need to look at the rules of origin in NAFTA or that something more needs to be done. But as companies, I guess especially in the auto industry, we've been integrated since 1965. So we've actually had 55 years of integration. We view certainly Canada, U.S., and more recently Mexico as one single market, and we need that flexibility to be able to source parts and to be able to build vehicles where it makes the most sense for us within that region, and then take that regional approach as we look outward. So we need to think about the content rules being North American content rules as we turn to other trade agreements, but we also have to recognize that the 62.5% right now is incredibly robust and among the highest in the world.
And that pretty well wraps your time up, Mr. Fonseca, and we're going to move over to our second round, and we're going to start the second round with the Liberals. And Madame Lapointe, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup d'être avec nous.
Thank you very much for being here today. I'm sure you all understand French. Mr. Sinclair, you mentioned earlier that if we're around the negotiation table for NAFTA, we have to have a lot of demands. And you mentioned the investment chapter. Do you have any other suggestions for our renegotiations so we have a strong position?
Question. In my opening remarks, I tried to highlight some of those. I think that around strong enforceable labor standards kind of goes somewhat with
de la main-d'œuvre. On a parlé beaucoup dans le CITA de la mobilité des main-d'œuvre.
When it comes to labor, that's something we discussed a lot in CITA. Is that something you've examined?
Yes, I think it's a critical part of a modern trade agreement. I would like to see it much more strongly enforceable than in any of Canada or the United States existing agreements. There are many options where, as you know, the NAFTA labor court is basically a joke and it's almost atrophied. So there has to be the ability for unions and workers to bring disputes directly in, that there be some sort of remedy. There are many options. There could be fines that could go into redressing the problem. It doesn't have to become like a labor version of investor-state dispute settlement where lawyers are chasing fees and so on. The money could go into actually redressing the problem.
Okay.
I've talked about procurement. I don't think that...
Je vais juste passer à Monsieur Wilson. Excusez.
Sorry, I'll just move on to Mr. Wilson as I have 3 questions at least. Mr. Wilson, earlier you said that we should greatly improve the agreement, which was made in 1994, since things have changed a lot since then. We have cell phones today, e-commerce, the World Wide Web, and especially the changes in China. Where can we improve?
Question. So a couple of specific areas, procurement, I'll pick up on Mr. Sinclair's point. This has been one of the biggest struggles, I think, for a lot of integrated industries to be able to sell into intergovernment procurement markets in Canada and the U.S., and now even trying to get even the extension of those now into private sector. We saw with the Keystone XL, for example, where they tried to extend it into that, and I doubt they will, but so some type of, certainly CME has been long-time advocates for some type of Buy North America model that recognizes the integration and procurement. So we're not just, if the focus is China, let's make the focus China, because that's what we keep being told it is. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what we keep hearing. But let's not make Canada the focus in these things. Other areas we mentioned, I think border simplification has to be something that we take a look at. This is the #1 issue, whether it's infrastructure or whether it's the red tape and regulation. We need to do something. We need to look at what Europe did, frankly. Europe copied, Europe went to the common market in part to combat the U.S.'s strength, right? In order to create their own economic sphere that could compete economically with the U.S. NAFTA was in part a response to that. Yet we've never moved the rules beyond what they originally were set up for 20, 25, even 30 years ago, and in some places with the auto sector even longer. So I think we need to be looking at the rules that govern the trade to eliminate as much of that red tape as possible. And these are serious asks that we need to be going to the U.S. with that will benefit Canadian industry and their industry at the same time. But we shouldn't be afraid, I think, to make those demands, to make it better, to make it stronger for our economies.
Lorsque vous parlez des regularization,
when you talk about regularization of the regulations, well, let's talk a little bit about red tape with Mr. Patterson. I'm from Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. That's my riding. Boisbriand and General Motors were in my former riding. And many say that the Boisbriand factory closed because of NAFTA. Reducing red tape, would that help keep jobs in Canada?
Would help keep jobs in Canada is in the auto sector. I think we have to recognize that the auto sector hasn't stood still in terms of technology either. Every year we get about 5% more productive just in the automation of our systems, and we are intensely competitive. With my colleague next to me, I'll remind her that we outsold her in Canada for the last couple of months. But technology is a very important thing that we need to focus on. And I just spent a full day at University of Montreal, University of McGill, and we are investing in all kinds of high technology software work that we in Canada have unique strengths in. Artificial intelligence, the University of Montreal, and we shouldn't forget this. The automotive sector is going to be one of the largest platforms in the world for new technology. We need to grow the jobs in that area as well as the traditional jobs that we've had. If we focus only on the traditional jobs, we will not grow. If we look at where the future is going and we think about things like intellectual property, we think about the movement of people, and we think about liberating the technology and the intelligence in our university systems to better commercialize products in Canada and grow Canadian startup companies, then you're going to actually grow. And I think Quebec is going to be a hotspot for that.
Thank you. And thank you, Madam Lapointe, and I caution witnesses. It's hard enough to keep us political parties from taking shots at each other, so don't go down that road. Sometimes we lose, sometimes. So anyway, we'll move on. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to move over to the Conservatives, and we got Mr. Van Kesteren. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. It's always great to hear from you. I don't really know where to go, but I think I want to follow what you were saying, David, and the reason I think that, as you know, we took a trip to the West Coast, and it became painfully obvious just how important technology was. If you think back the 20th century, the Carnegies, the Chryslers, and the Fords, these were people that produced goods. Today's billionaires produce that. And there really is no good. And Mr. Morrison, you mentioned, we got to get the Chinese. Listen, we set them up. I think if we really want to be honest, we took our manufacturers over there and we introduced them to the Chinese, and they had a 50-50 deal. I think it was 49-51, and that's where our manufacturing went. We just sold our manufacturing, quite frankly. So, but today's, I think, I want to just touch on this, for instance. Tesla, I forget what they get subsidized, but it's thousands of dollars, $15,000 for electric car. This is what you're competing with as Ford Motor and as General Motors and as Chrysler and manufacturers too. We're competing in a world that's changing rapidly, and the only thing I see that we can do is to offer manufacturers, because there's no reason why Ford or Chrysler or General Motors stays in Canada other than it's got to make economic sense. There's really no other. It's not because they think we're wonderful and this is a Canadian. It's not a Canadian company. So how do you see that in your day-to-day operations as a challenge where you're competing with investment that goes to stuff that really produces nothing, and trying to maintain your growth in that new world that we're living in? Can you maybe comment on that?
I can start off on that because I think it's a great question, and I think if I put on my hat I'm the past chair of the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, one of the areas that we've looked at quite intently is intellectual property. As you say, right now the world's economy is based on intangible goods. And the most of the world's wealth today is generated by intangible goods. They cross borders electronically, and the value of those goods comes from the inventiveness and the creativity that we have. We have no shortage of that inventiveness and creativity here in Canada. I had the great honor to work at BlackBerry for a number of years, where we took a new technology and changed the world for a period of time. And you get disrupted and things change. So we have to understand that we can't look strictly backwards in the rearview mirror in terms of the type of industry that we have. We need to be competitive in new areas. I think we have incredible strengths coast to coast in Canada in these areas, and I think we're starting to harness them. But that is a valid area that we should think about in NAFTA, and it's a valid area that we should think about, frankly, as a point of public policy in Canada, to make sure that we're properly leveraging it so that we can not only have little Canadian companies get bought by multinationals, but they grow up and become strong domestic champions. And I'll just finish by saying that in setting up all the technology that we have here in Canada, we really believe one of the reasons we're here is to share intellectual property and co-develop intellectual property with Canadian companies because they're that good. And that's an opportunity, too, because, frankly, we're a massive customer. And if you sell to 10 million widgets to us, that's pretty good.
So those centers of excellence are so critical in maintaining our position.
We have some natural ones, and we're augmenting those, too, whether we call them clusters or what have you. It really is important, but we should understand what we have and make sure that we compete at a global level of competitiveness and not just sort of prop up things that are also rants.
Carolyn, did you want to jump in on that?
Sure. No, absolutely. Centers of excellence are incredibly important. I think, though, one of the pieces of good news is that while in the electronic and information era, things move, over the internet, people actually physically have to move through means like cars. So the car and on vehicles and for mobility purposes will be around for a long time. They will they will become more and more advanced and include more technology. Our plants are also advanced manufacturing plants where, despite the huge investments, we're getting productivity gains so that you're seeing fewer and fewer people needed per unit of production. But that all keeps us on the leading edge of technology. The R&D goes hand in hand with the production. And all I can say is that, we have to encourage the R&D where it makes sense, but we also have to look at things like the Automotive Innovation Fund, right? And the change from a loan to a cash grant was incredibly important to help keep Canada competitive.
Thank you. And that, if you have a quick comment, go ahead, Mr. Morrison.
We need to have the ability to link collaboratively these centers of excellence. The future is all going to be collaborative design innovation, and that is a North American platform again, I believe.
Well, thank you. And at this moment, I'd like to welcome Mr. Oliver from Oakville, another big car-producing area. And you're going to share some time, I hear, with Mr. Peterson. Okay, so go ahead. Who's going first?
I'll go first. There,
okay, go ahead, Mr. Peterson.
I wanted to briefly make a comment on Mr. Morrison. You alluded to members of Congress and senators being 535 people with their own sort of fiefdoms. It's not that different than it is for us here as members of Parliament. At the end of the day, we have to represent the interests of our constituents, and I can tell you from my riding that thousands of jobs rely on NAFTA. In fact, thousands of jobs rely on the auto sector. I have Magna International is in my riding, and I know there's about 5,000 to 7,000 jobs, direct jobs, just from that employer. So we all are quite aware of what who the job producers are in our ridings as well. It's very important for all elected officials. And because of that, I have the pleasure of being on our party's Auto Caucus. And with that segue, I'll introduce John Oliver, is actually the chair of our Auto Caucus. He's sitting in on this committee today, and is the member of Parliament for Oakville. So he's quite familiar, obviously, with the automotive world. So I'm going to give the rest of my time to Mr. Oliver.
Thanks very much, Kyle, and thank you, Chair, for letting me attend the meeting. And thank you very much for the excellent presentations. Really good thoughts around modernizing of NAFTA. I just we're focusing right now on NAFTA, and Canadians are seized with this negotiation coming up. But before NAFTA, there's another big change coming, and this is about the competitiveness of Canadian firms. So I'm wondering, with the corporate tax changes planned in the U.S., and particularly for U.S. subs that are based in Canada, Caroline, David, do you see any risk to your competitiveness here coming out of those corporate tax changes? And could you share that with I think it's important the committee understands that.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I can start there. So we need to see what the proposed changes are before we can answer that in detail. However, today Canada's tax rate is 25%. The U.S. tax rate is 35%, and Canada's clearly is lower and provides an advantage depending on what the U.S. does, and especially if they no longer tax worldwide profits and they lower their rate, it could have a significant competitive impact. So we need to be able to be nimble to be able to evaluate and react to it.
I can add to put a finer point on it. Effectively, some of the proposals, and there's more than one in the United States, would fund a tax cut in the United States through a border adjustment tax, which could place anywhere up to a 20% tax on everything that we send into the United States and back 7 times. That would be a very severe constraint to the ability to win new investment for anything in Canada that depends on the United States market. If you put 20% cost, you don't have a margin left. So that would be something that one hopes is not contemplated. I think it would be something that is also problematic in the United States in various ways as well, let alone trying to understand how it would ever be calculated in the kind of integrated business that we're in. So it's challenging, but one hopes that that moves forward without that aspect.
Okay. I'd also heard there's a potential of higher corporate taxes on earnings of Canadian-based firms or firms outside of the U.S. This is potential than what would be taxed for those firms based in the U.S. So given that that's about sort of tax policy in the U.S. and how it affects businesses, is there a place for Canada to intervene in that other than just, is there like NAFTA, there's a clear moment of intervention. Is there a point where Canada could influence the U.S. corporate tax?
Well, if I can just very quickly, and it's to Matt's point, that I know, for example, Perrin Beatty from the Chamber of Commerce has been visiting in various states with Congress people across the United States to explain this point. One of the things about that sort of scary scenario I had is that's a direct addition to anything that an American consumer buys. And so you're talking at your Walmart store, you're talking at anywhere that you're purchasing, potentially increasing those costs as they flow through to U.S. consumers. And so I think the answer is that we need to talk about it, we need to have facts, and we need to share them in a credible kind of way, and I think in a confident way, and that's what I'm pleased to see Canada's been doing.
If another question I had was, both of you had 5 or 6 good sort of pieces of advice on how to modernize NAFTA, what needs to change. But in terms of the actual process of negotiating NAFTA, do you have any advice to the committee that they could pass through to government on how to structure that negotiation? I guess I'm leading you to, do you see a need for an auto table in behind the scenes?
Sorry, Mr. Oliver, this is going to have to be one person with a very quick answer. Go ahead.
Yes, an auto table would be an excellent idea.
So, now, before we move to Conservatives, I don't usually ask a question, but I got a question for Ms. Marsden. Recently, I read an article in The Economist about the sugar industry in Europe, and where I think 75% of Europeans used to have their sugar from sugarcane, and now it's almost all going to the sugar beets, and they are changing their subsidies and quotas, but that's over there. And when we were in Colorado, we had a conversation with an agricultural representative down there where they were talking about subsidies. And of course, we threw back the sugar thing and how it's been difficult for our sugar beet industry in Canada because of the United States. So that being said, and if we're going to go back to the table where everything might be on the table, how do you think we should approach the Americans on the so-called the subsidies and a new deal with a sugar deal? What would you like to see?
Thank you for the question. Well, it's complicated. The devil's in the detail, of course, but the TPP approach was, I think, something to look back at. We obtained a modest outcome. Of course, we won't see that, but it did address a number of the issues that I talked about. So we have both quota limitations, which have not kept pace with the growth of the U.S. market, for example. Very small in the case of beet sugar and also small in the case of a number of food products. Rules of origin, Canada can't export products that contain, say, sweetened cocoa powder that has cane sugar under quota because it doesn't meet their rule of origin because of the sugar. So there are competitive inputs that we can't supply or that our customers can't supply to their United States multinational location. The end-use restrictions, I think, and this is something we experienced in CITA. Canada negotiated some new access under CITA. We don't face those end-use restrictions, or we won't when CITA is implemented. So, for example, you can't send a pie to, like a Canadian producer of frozen pies can't send a pie to the United States and have it baked in store. It's considered further processing. So, there's some really outdated restrictions that were based on concerns 3 decades ago that just don't have a place. So there's a number of things I think we can achieve, and that would to be to the benefit of all trading partners.
Well, thank you. And we're going to go to the Conservatives now. And Mr. Ritz, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your presentations today. We get a crack at rewriting this, and I think it's not a bad thing. There's been 11 different times that NAFTA has been tweaked, but this is going to be more than a tweak, and I don't think that's a bad thing in and of itself. One of the first things the President Trump did was give a list of 40 issues to Congress, saying, let's look at these as we renegotiate. And both Matthew and Matt, you talk about a study that you're doing. Is that something like you're having in mind, saying these are the issues? So this would be our 40?
So we actually took that list and asked people what their priorities were around those specifically. Okay. So that's exactly what.
So again, you're working from that list. You're not looking from a Canadian content side.
We added a bit of Canadian flavor to it just because we needed to, and we also asked a bunch of open-ended questions around them. But we actually went to that original list in the leaked TPA document and said, what are your priorities around each one of these? So things like supply management services, all those things, we've included those in our list. Yeah.
Good, thank you. The one thing government never does well is work at the speed of commerce. We've got all these silos, and even when you talk about a whole of government approach, you can never get it done because the bridge from industry doesn't get to trade, doesn't get to ag, doesn't get to, and that's something that's always a constant fight. But when you are global in scope, whether you're based in Canada or based somewhere else and global in scope, you're always, as you said, David, you're always arguing for investment here because this is your backyard. How do we address the inequities in taxation, regulatory burden, red tape? Now we look at a border tax and a carbon tax, and by the time you add all this stuff up, you create these huge disparities. How do you take all of that into consideration when you look at making investments in this country or elsewhere?
Well, you've outlined very well some of the key things that we do look into, and in fact, hats off to the Ontario and federal governments have actually assigned someone to come to us and ask for our list, first time. And, because there's a process we go through. Part of it involves our negotiations with labor, because that's a controlled cost that we can together
You're looking for that
come up with.
predictability and stability.
But we look at all the policy aspects. I mean, famously, we talk a lot about electricity costs right now in Ontario.
Recycling.
Recycling, we can get a competitive advantage by being landfill free here in Canada, and we do that. Some of the advantages we can take from some of the environmental policy here too is that if we can align our efforts to reduce greenhouse gases, which we're pretty darn good at, and saving money by paying less in terms of inputs for energy, we can be more competitive. And so we are constantly trying to find 1 inch more of competitiveness to be able to make the case that the next investment should come here to our plants. And it's the sum total of all those things: public policy, labor costs, and overall cost. Currency exchange is a big factor in it, of course. Supply chain, its effectiveness, the innovation base of that supply chain is critical for the future. And then we just have to innovate.
Sure. So would it be outside the norm? Mr. Sinclair talked about there are labor standards in NAFTA that's never measured up. Mexico keeps punting them down the road. Now they're talking 2020. If there were chapters in there on labor standards, environmental standards, regulatory standards, and monetary standards that actually had teeth in them, does that then set a stronger parameter for government to do what industry needs government to do? Or is that getting too intrusive?
No, in fact, that mirrors the recommendations that we have as an industry, and it mirrors the AAPC recommendations in the U.S. to the U.S. government.
Yeah, when we started the Beyond the Borders, the tough part was to get the Americans to pay attention. And they use it as a backstop. It's basically a non-tariff trade barrier. They can pull out whatever they need and say, no, not today. How do you end up with fair trade as well as free trade?
Mm-hmm. So some of the recommendations that we're making specifically on fair trade versus, and in free trade is incorporating currency manipulation into the NAFTA agreement. So because, again, we're all looking to export from NAFTA outside of the region, and we see currency manipulation ongoing in key markets that are closed to our products, and that sets up a very unlevel playing field for our workers.
Yeah, the U.S. talked about hooking that into TPP. And Mike Froman, I saw an interview he did the other day, and he said basically if you're tweaking NAFTA, TPP is the model. And you work to some of those standards. But again, they didn't go as far as currency manipulation because nobody would, Japan especially, would not entertain it. And the Americans are some of the worst currency manipulators. Without pointing fingers. Yeah.
Despite the fact that Japan has agreed to the IMF standards, and the leading economists have suggested a currency discipline based on a simple three-part test based on IMF principles that all of the parties to TPP had agreed to outside, but they don't want the teeth in the agreement.
It wasn't in the agreement; it was attached.
We're proposing putting the teeth in the agreement, putting it in NAFTA, and then making that the gold standard as we go forward to other trade agreements.
Good. Thank you. That wraps up your time, and we're going to go to the NDP now. Ms. Ramsey, you've got 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be able to ask you about the bridge. This is, the elephant in the room down in Windsor, Essex. It's so incredibly important to our region. I attended the Great Lakes Economic Forum a couple weeks ago. Everyone was talking about the bridge and what will happen, with the bridge, the new bridge project. But there are already 10,000 trucks going across the Ambassador Bridge every day. It's the largest trade, point between in North America, really. So my question is about that border and, if anything happens to hinder the efficiency or the security of goods crossing there, can you speak to us about the impact it would have on jobs here in Canada?
Go ahead. Oh, okay. Well, that's exactly the problem is that we rely on the efficiency of the border. Again, our vehicles cross the border 7 times from start to finish, and we're competing with the imported vehicles that are coming in on ships, cross one border, and you can fit a lot more vehicles on one ship, right, versus or one container versus the trucks that we use to carry our vehicles. So it very quickly exponentially becomes a disincentive to investing in Canada or a disincentive to producing in the NAFTA region.
Well, so here's a stat that I find interesting. When the Ambassador Bridge was first built, Canada-U.S. trade was almost non-existent. So Canada's total exports at the time the Ambassador Bridge was built is about equivalent to 1 week's worth of auto trade today. So if you put that in perspective, we're still shipping that same amount over a bridge that was meant for kind of global trade at the time over the course of a year, really, which really comes down to a week today, just in one sector. And at the Ambassador Bridge, those two sectors make up about 95% of its agriculture and automotive. So the infrastructure in Canada, and this goes back to RCC and beyond that, or beyond the border and beyond that, the infrastructure in Canada is woefully inadequate to deal with. And we're not just talking about Ambassador Bridge that you're familiar with, obviously just one corridor. I cross a lot, for example, personally, going down through the Niagara Way. That's, the Peace Bridge down through there, 3 lanes. It's backed up all the time, never mind a long weekend when everyone else is going. The trucks are backed up with them. The Blue Water is the only bridge we've really seen an expansion on, at least in the Great Lakes area. And recently, we need more trade infrastructure. And then to the world, too, we have very limited access, whether it's east or west. We have, and whether it's trucks and cars or whether it's even energy supply, we can't get our stuff to the world. And we've really lacked in our investment in trade infrastructure for decades. This isn't a recent thing. This is a decades-old problem.
So have you already seen an impact? Because I can tell you that my office receives phone calls weekly from businesses, from people who work across the border that live in my region. There has already been a change at that border. Really, there's a lot of uncertainty about people being able to cross, about goods being able to cross, things being turned back or held up. Are you experiencing any of that?
It's going to have to be a
just
very
from
quick
what's
answer.
happened?
Very quick answer. Go ahead.
Yes, we have seen a thickening of the border both ways in terms of more frequent requests for letters and inconsistencies in terms of what we're being asked for, especially the people movement across the border.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move over to the Liberals. They got the last slot here today. And Mr. Dhaliwal, you got the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the last province going that way. I'm from beautiful British Columbia. In February 2017, CEO of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said that withdrawing from NAFTA would be devastating for workers, businesses, and economies of our countries. And he also said that jobs of 14 million Americans depend on the agreement as well. And my question is, how would the U.S. withdrawn from NAFTA affect Canadian provinces and the U.S. states in the Pacific Northwest? And also, what actions should Government of Canada take to ensure that the efficient implementation of the agreement?
Okay. Well, thank you. I do. That's one of the one of the goals or objectives of our survey and our modernization task force is to really determine what are the on-the-ground impacts of the current NAFTA agreement. We don't know what might be proposed, so it's hard to know how that would change. But we certainly want to get as much data as we can and make sure the data gets to the right place. I'm not totally sure about the intent of your question, but
the intent is we just want to see, particularly because I come from British Columbia and I'm concerned about the states that is on the Pacific Northwest. How if we bring in the modernization or change NAFTA or withdraw out of NAFTA, and first thing is that you agree with that, and what should we as a government do to make sure that that we are able to achieve in the best interest of the Pacific region?
Well, I think that, there's already great relationships between BC and Washington, and this will continue. I think it's great that Bill Gates is building, very keenly interested in the innovation corridor between BC and Washington State. And, there's a great deal of interest that he has personally in this relationship. The innovation corridor is really a big part of with Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all opening offices in Vancouver, but connecting to Seattle, that's the future. And we have to make sure that whatever agreement we have allows for the free mobility of those workers to attend meetings, et cetera, because that is a big problem that we face daily. Canadian workers being able to come down to the, to Redmond, Washington, and meet with the corporate headquarters and so on. So the professional list in NAFTA is so old. There was no internet when it was made, and we got to update that list. But that's a huge area that I see that needs to be in the modernized agreement.
Following up on Ms. Ramsey's conversation that we had on the bottleneck, I come from British Columbia. I said there is also a corridor there as well. The Pacific border upgrade, and as far as I remember, it was the last Liberal government that committed money, and the Conservatives followed that through, right? And we committed the money anyways, so it doesn't matter. But that carried on, and now we also committed $2 billion over the next 10 years, and I would like to see your comments. How would that help, or is it enough, or do you need to see more done? Anyone can.
Well, maybe I'll start. I don't want to get into a political fight over who committed money. I think there's been the Canadian taxpayer. That's a good one. Yeah. No, but I don't know what the right number is. $2 billion, $5 billion, $10 billion. I don't know. My comment was more the fact that we let this stuff drift for decades, and we never paid attention to it. And certainly in the auto sector, they were screaming for new crossings in southern Ontario. I know in tourism, in places in the east and west, they were screaming for it for years, and nothing was done. And it's something that was unfortunate that happened. But I do think over the last, say, decade to 15 years, there's been a renewed attention on it. Certainly in the Windsor corridor in southern Ontario and out west in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., there has been more investment that has gone in. And I think let's wait and see when those investments actually come into play, like the Ambassador Bridge replacement or doubling with the new Gordie Howe Bridge, for example. We don't know what the impact of that's really going to be until it's actually operational. I can tell you, even the extension of the 401 has made a huge improvement going into Windsor. It's beautiful and very efficient. It's helped a lot, I know, moving facility trucks through. So let's see what the infrastructure does, but let's not fall asleep at the switch again for a couple generations. Let's make sure we stay on top of it. I guess that's the big message.
Well, thank you, and that wraps up your time. And I think all MPs had a chance to dialogue and questions. Really good questions here this afternoon, and of course, really good presentations from the witnesses. We really appreciate you coming. And I also like to note, as you know, our committee is switching gears quite a bit, different studies, and a lot of witnesses that are here today have repeatedly come back and helped us out with our studies, and so we really appreciate you coming back and helping us again. And as you say, this whole process is going to take at least a year probably, and so our study's probably going to go right into the fall, and we'll probably give you some update or the final draft of our study. And so again, thank you very much for coming, and we hope to see you again. So that ends today's session.